economy is something like a tenth of what it was in terms of its GDP, and there was no functioning industry of any description.
So did Putin, because Assad comes into power at around the same time Putin does, right? In 2000, did they immediately become good friends?
It's hard to tell personal relationships because Putin is he's just a very tricky guy to read.
He's a cagey fuck.
Very cagey fuck. He was of course he was KGB. Literally, he was a part of the KGB before the Soviet Union collapsed. But for sure, they had a really chummy relationship in which Assad would make endless trips to Moscow and have his picture taken with Putin. So they bonded that way. You can sort of look and try to read Putin's expression sometimes, and he's kind of this sneer at everybody that he sees as being somewhat inferior to him. Here's this Middle Eastern tin-pot dictator. Why do I really have to get my picture taken with him? That kind of thing. But they did kind of use each other. They were convenient. Helpful to each other to have that relationship.
And the guys that you talked about, like the Billy Bats guys, the dudes, the intelligence services, I guess, within the military who existed, who were under his father before him, that he then kind of kowtowed to as far as like their style was, which is like, all right, anything that speaks against us, we're going to beat down. Was there a lot of Russian influence already in place within those organizations, do you think?
There was a lot of intermixing, and I know this because I have spent a lot of time studying Syria's chemical weapons program, and you see Russian military officers kind of coming in and out of that environment, helping the Syrians get the equipment they need, teaching them how to do things. So and obviously military advisors, coming in constantly, a steady stream of people coming in to help prop up Syria's military. And for the Russians, it's a lovely little hangout for them because it's beautiful, Mediterranean coastline. Damascus is not a bad place. Aleppo's a lively city. So if you're a retiring, KGB officer or Soviet general, it's not a bad place to have a villa.
Spot.
It is good spot. And there were lots of villas that sort of Russians, bought and held for all those years and still do.
So in those 2000s, prior to the Civil War, he's still keeping that relationship going with Russia. Obviously, his style changes. What is the Syrian economy in peacetime like then? Like, how are they at least slightly well-functioning sovereign nation at that point?
Yeah, and they had surprisingly well-developed industries, like medical industry. They had one of the biggest producers of pharmaceuticals in the region up until 2011 was Syria. It was a popular tourist destination. It's a little hard for Americans to go there, but people from the rest of the world go to Damascus and go to Aleppo, one of the oldest cities in the world, and just enjoy touring. You've got these amazing Roman ruins in the desert, a place like Palmyra, which has just unbelievable temples and things that are left over from the Roman times. Many of them got beat up and knocked apart by ISIS when they came in.
I was going to say, they're not still there, right?
The museum's been looted. A lot of the relics and statues have been literally destroyed with hammers and sledgehammers and that kind of thing by ISIS, which was one of the many gifts they gave to the world. But yeah, it was, a midland but not insignificant economy. People were well educated in Syria. They have good universities for that part of the world.
And they don't anymore, right?
It's the economy is something like a tenth of what it was in terms of its GDP, and there was no functioning industry of any description, and that's why the whole country fell back to essentially becoming a narco state. So it went from being, a moderately affluent Middle Eastern country to a country that essentially makes its living from making illegal drugs and selling them around the world.
Yeah, you were talking about that last time.
Captagon was the main one.
So
right.
Just can you refresh people on what that is? And by the way, like what you witnessed with that too?
Oh, it's insane. So Captagon is it's kind of like a speed. It's very popular in the Middle East. It's sort of the club drug in Gulf countries where they're not it's harder to get alcohol, but the kids love their Captagon.
Kids and Joby.
The kids
Joby loves it too.
No, I wouldn't say that. What I got to witness was was the crazy trafficking that took place along the borders, like Syria, like along the frontier with Jordan. It's all kind of drug country, and so you have these big organized convoys. Sometimes 100 vehicles would punch across the border into Jordan and then kind of fan out, with drugs, just truckloads of drugs to smuggle into Jordan and from Jordan to other places. Israel has a problem with it. Gulf countries were just getting tons of Syrian Captagon. So it was a huge problem for the whole region. And it was basically set up because Assad and his generals needed income. They couldn't tax people anymore because there's no tax base left. And so they became drug lords.
So it's directly attributable to Assad. It's not like one of those things where he knows it's going on, but he's not really a part of it.
Yeah, his brother was a guy named Maher, ran the 4th Army Division, and their central the reason for existing was to kind of be mules for these drug production companies. And we was part of my reporting on this is we identified individual factories, places where they were making this stuff. And
how'd you find that?
So we had some help on the ground. Some of the Syrian opposition groups that are around would help us kind of locate places, and then we would use really good satellite mapping. You can see the trucks coming in and out. You can see where the places are, and then we went to our intel friends and say, well, we think these are essentially drug hubs, and we would get confirmation that way. But it was incredible. It's this huge network of factories that did nothing but make drugs, and they were all along these valleys east of or west of Damascus, between Damascus and Lebanon, and there were tunnels moving the stuff into Lebanon. Just a crazy infrastructure that came around or built around this one drug.
Yeah, do you ever get worried about, obviously it seems like this is a really good case because you've actually seen some of it traffic with your own eyes, but do you ever get worried about some of these places where you actually can't go, like even you, because they're literally in the middle of like an ongoing war, and then you have to get confirmation from people who may be biased to have a certain confirmation go one way or the other in the case of like any intel agent at any country that you may be working with?
Yeah, so that's why I have to be really careful with the reporting, because you're right. There are people who want to promote a certain side of the story. In this case, we ended up getting real good help from the Jordanians, who don't like to talk about this because it's a bad look for Jordan to have a drug problem coming across the border. So for a long time, they just tried not to talk about it. They wouldn't answer questions about it. But they became so concerned because it was such a problem that I got escorts up to the border.
From the Mukhabarat?
From the armed forces, from the Jordanian Defense Forces. And, we had to put on our helmets and body armor to go up there because it's a free fire zone in some cases. Depends on the time of year. It's sometimes worse than others. If it's crappy weather, tends to be more because they have to take advantage of fog or cloud cover to come across. But it's they were sending drones. They were just any way to get drugs across, and would get into fights with the Jordanians all the time. So it'd be firefights breaking out along the border, people getting killed on both sides.
Doesn't that get weird though? Because technically these are people who are literally representing the government of a sovereign country, even though they're drug dealers.
Yeah.
And they're getting in a fight with the military guys of another sovereign country.
Jordanians don't talk about this, but they actually had airstrikes in Syria, which is a country they're not at war with. But they identified the homes of drug barons or some of the drug storage facilities, and they sent aircraft across the border and bombed them. So that's how concerned they are about it. And that changes now. Let's see. It's interesting. In the last 2 weeks, some of the most interesting photos that are coming out of people's selfies and phone cameras is the Captagon they're finding on the ground. Because I can't tell you how many I've seen. Just somebody's walking to a warehouse and my God, it's just mountains of pills. Or along the border with Lebanon, tunnels where trucks were moving stuff across. Tunnels dug through the mountains into
El Chapo style.
Yeah, so it's huge business. It's something, boy, different estimates, and it's really hard to get a real good figure for how much money they were making. But reliably, the regime was making a couple $2 billion a year just from their proceeds off of Captagon, and the actual generation of revenue was much greater than that.
If there were like airstrikes happening though, like things got that serious, again, we obviously didn't hear much about that here, but that's a big deal to me between two countries. How did a war not break out from that?
Yeah, just because the Assad government is so kind of besieged And so basically just trying to defend whatever is left of it. They're not looking to get into a war with Jordan or anyone else. They just essentially, they've put up the fences. They're doing their drug thing. They don't care what anybody else in the world says. Don't mind so much if a drug lord gets whacked by the Jordanians because it doesn't affect Bashar in his palace in Damascus. And so they just ignored it. I mean, they put out a press release, or even better than that, they had a couple of staged, just because they wanted to show the world they were taking it seriously, they had a couple of staged drug raids where you could tell it staged because they had the cameras there, they had the guys coming the trucks going to this, oh, look, we found drugs at this place, and it'd be a couple of bags, and they have a couple of photos, and see, Syria's taking this drug problem seriously, and then the next day, it's just they're back to business as normal.
Watching the video, guys, if you haven't already subscribed, please smash that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here